and now he's become an apostle. In fact, God tells him and says, I've called you to be the apostle to the Gentiles. Paul was specifically chosen to be at the very front, the very tip of advancing the gospel. Sometimes in English we use the expression tip of the spear. So the spear is long, it's got a shaft or an arrow, and then you've got the point, that very tip that goes first. In a sense, Paul was like that in advancing the gospel. So what Paul means is he's not saying in all these places that everybody is saved. But the particular work that God had called Paul to do was to be the first into areas that had not yet heard the gospel. And of course, this is very early in the church. Very early on, where the gospel had started spreading and God was doing a great work. But there were many, many places that the gospel had not yet gone. And Paul had the spirit and the attitude of, I want to be the first. I want to go to those places where the people have never heard the gospel. That was Paul's passion. That was his heartbeat. And he says that in verse 20. Yea, so have I strived to preach the gospel, not where Christ was named, lest I should build upon another man's foundation. So, we know Paul's pattern in the book of Acts. He would go into these cities like Ephesus and Philippi and Antioch and Illyricum and these other cities. He would go and he would preach the gospel boldly right away. He would make disciples. You're studying that about discipleship. He was engaged in teaching the new believers so that they were rooted and grounded in God's word and they became true followers and disciples of Jesus. But we see his pattern in the book of Acts and in the epistles. He would start that work and then he would take off. He was a missionary in the true sense. He would go, he would start the work, he would ordain pastors, elders, deacons, church leaders in every church, and then he would commend them to the Lord, and then he would go and preach the gospel in new places. So that's why he says that his passion, his burden,